series of webinars. We're going to be starting with our Dashboards 101 today. As you see on the slide, I'm a senior consultant with CCSI out of Rochester. I'm also the Chief Information Officer for Spectrum Health and Human Services, and have worked with Lisa Clark on our Bags of Money series. Out of that series, we did a dashboard piece, and there seemed to be some interest in doing a bit more of a technical presentation on dashboards, some of the tools that are available to create those. So that's why we're here today. We originally talked about this as a two-part series, Dashboards 101, which today is the presentation today, which is much more foundational, talking about data, talking about tables, taking a look at how information is structured, and really the building blocks upon which we're going to be creating our dashboards. The second is Dashboards 101 is really when we start working within the pivot tables, data visualization, filtering tools, giving you some hands-on experience in building out the kind of data analysis and data visualization tools that is really going to be critical going forward. We have added a third. We haven't announced the date on that yet. But the third is a more advanced look at how you can bring data from different data sources into your data visualizations. I'll be talking a little bit more about that at our next webinar. But these are some of the business intelligence tools that really make your dashboards much more robust. So we'll talk a little bit about that next time. So we do, the goal for the series is try to do something a little bit different and really provide some step-by-step instructions. How you can take some of your raw data and turn it into meaningful and useful information. And then you can use for analysis, monitoring, and generate some insights that really then can be applied to inform your decision making. We did something a little bit different. You'll see in your chat box you have a link. That link will be able to take you to the slides that we have here today, which don't have that much information on, but you might be useful for you. But we've also posted a sample database. It's a clinic database. I'll be showing that to you in just a couple minutes. What we were hoping is that you would download the database and then either while I'm talking, fool around with it, or after we're done with the webinar to go onto the CTAC website, get the recording of this webinar, and then practice with the data, using the data that I'm going to be working with today. I decided to do it that way. That's the best way I learn. I like to see things, and I like to do it hands-on, go back, practice, gain my skills, go into different areas of Excel, look at it, see what it does, and really this experiential learning works best for me, and I hope that that's going to work best for you also. So the agenda today, again, it's very foundational. We're going to be talking a little bit about the tools inside of Excel, discuss a little bit about standard data structure and sources of information. I'm going to demonstrate the use of tables. We're going to take a look at the functionality. And at the very end, I'll give you a little teaser on pivot tables and show you how we will move from the foundational piece that we're working on today and move into the more active kind of visualization dashboard pieces. A couple of real quick housekeeping. Everybody's on mute. That's normally the only way we can manage these. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. We will set aside some time at the end, hopefully about 10 minutes, if I can pace this correctly, so we can answer some of your questions. The other thing, too, is this is going to be, I'm going to be sharing my screen. It's really going to be a demonstration using my Excel. And so if you Normally inside of your Cisco WebEx, if you look just above your PowerPoints, display, there's normally two little arrows sort of pointing up to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and the lower-hand corner of the screen. If you click on that, you should go to full screen mode. I think that might be a better way for you to see what I'm working on today. So with that, I'm going to take a second and share my screen. Just hold on one second. Okay. And so what you should be seeing right now is a just blank Excel spreadsheet. The demonstration that I'm going to do is I'm using Excel 2010. If you have a lower version or maybe have Excel 2016, some of what you see might be slightly different. Also, I have a couple different menu items for some of the add-ins that I use in my work. So when you bring it up, you may not see exactly what you're looking at here today, but the functionality that we're going to be looking at is pretty standard functionality, and you should be able to find it in your version of Excel. I will put in a plug for Excel 2016. Microsoft has worked pretty aggressively over the last 3 or 4 years to bring some of these analytic tools and have them baked right into the Excel spreadsheet. So I think some of the higher level business intelligence tools are really living very nicely inside of Excel 2016, but everything that we're going to be doing today, you'll be able to do with whatever version of Excel you have. The first thing that I'm going to do is we're going to start with our data, and I'm going to open up the sample database. The series is going to assume that you are able to get information out of your billing system or your electronic medical record. I do want to say that you know, I do a lot of work around the state, and one of the things that's always frustrated me is that time and time again, I come and talk with folks who are sitting on a huge amount of data inside of their electronic medical record. And they have on their desktop I believe, one of the better data analytic tools in Excel. And the two of those never meet. So one of the things that you need to think about as an organization is that if you can't get good data out of your electronic medical record system, either through canned reports or through a report generator, you're really just going to need to figure that out. One of the reasons I think there's so much interest in this series, in the outcome series that we're doing over on the MCTAC side, is that data reporting, outcome reporting, data analysis is just going to be a critical aspect for us going forward. In the changes in performance-based contracting and home and community-based services, CCBHCs, all the different initiatives that are going right now are really data-driven, and your decision-making needs to be data-informed. So if you're having difficulty getting data out of your systems, you really need to figure out how to address that and address that as quickly as you possibly can. So that being aside, let's start working a little bit here. So this is a sample database. This is a basic data structure, and it is a database in a format that's called a CSV. I use a CSV format because that's a very common format that for information coming out of electronic medical records. It's actually a text format, but Excel reads it very nicely as a basic Excel file. So the sample database has data elements, which are across the top, and they have records, which are the rows inside of the database. So if you take a look at this, I have 9,563 records, and what we have is 9,000 records, and we have across the top our data elements. So before we start doing the data elements, I'm going to show you the first thing that is going to be absolutely essential for you. Is you'll see that this data is very difficult to work on in its current condition. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up into my Insert menu up here. I'm going to click on my table, and you'll see what's happening here is Excel understands what I'm trying to accomplish here. And it has took a look at the data and decided that intuited that I want to create a table based upon all the information currently in this worksheet. You'll see this right in this little box here. It shows A1 to M9564. There's a critical aspect of doing this. Make sure this little box is checked right here. It's called My Table Has Headers. If you don't check that box, then your first row, which is really your the definition of your data elements, will not show up, and that's a critical piece in creating a table. So make sure that box is checked. It's checked by default, so you shouldn't have a difficulty with that, but every once in a while it's not there, so make sure that you select that. You're going to press OK. You'll see how this has changed. I'm going to open up these columns a little bit so you can start seeing the data that's in here. Now, this is a sample database. If you look at this and you think you recognize anything, you really probably don't. Is that the only thing that is in this database that is not made up are the service descriptions, the CPT codes, and the CPT weights. Everything else is fictitious information. The names of staff were from a random name generator, so we're really not worried about any possible PHI being in this sample database. So when we create this table, I'm going to use a database and a table interchangeably, because really once you turn it into a table, it looks and acts and smells like a database. So let's start walking through what this actually means. So I'm going to assume that this is a sample report that I'm able to run out of my electronic medical record. I'm able to choose the fields. The fields I chose for this was the staff name, my program location, the date of a service, the start date, the end date of a service code, the service description, the CPT code, the unit weight for a CPT code, a client number. We left the client name blank on this. I have a payer, and then I have a payer type. We'll be using some of these data elements today, but all of them will be part of the dashboards that we'll be building as we go forward. One of the things, and you know, if you're an advanced user in Excel, the kind of stuff that I'm going to be talking about today is really going to be very second nature to you. I'd ask some more advanced folks to be patient. I can't guarantee, but I'm pretty sure by the time we get to the end of the third presentation in this series that you're going to be learning in some aspects of Excel that you're going to find very useful. Some of the business intelligence tools that we'll be talking about later in this series are tools that are really very much underutilized. What I'm going to ask that you think about is as you start this practice of building these data tables, bringing information out of your electronic medical record system, the first thing you have to really do is vet your information. That is, that you have to take a look at the information that's coming out of your system is what you expect it to be. Don't assume that just because you ran the report, what you're getting is absolutely what you expect it to look like. You could, based upon your configuration, you could be getting duplicate services, so you might be counting things twice. You may find that there are data elements that you need as part of your dashboards that are not required in your EHR, so you've got holes in your data. So you need to bring it down, and at least the first time you bring it down, do a pretty close examination of that. And I'll show you how, one of the ways that you might be able to do that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to our top row inside of our table. You'll see a little drop-down box here. I'm going to open that up. What you're going to see is a representation of all the distinct values that are in that column. So I opened up my staff column, and so these are the staff names that make up this database. So first thing you want to do is go, okay, is this what I'm expecting? Are these the staff that I'm expecting to look at? The second piece is our program codes, same kind of a thing. These are all the distinct values in that column. Go through there and take a look and make sure you've got what you're thinking about, or what you anticipate should be in your data set. That's one way you can start vetting it, and I'd go through and do it in each of your data elements. It's only going to take a second. It's worth a few minutes in the beginning to make sure that you feel confident that the data that you're working with is what you expect it to be, so your dashboards and visualizations will be accurate. If you're standing this up for the first time and you're going to start working with your staff around this, the last thing you want is for there to be errors in this data, particularly if you're trying to build engagement with your staff and really working with folks around numbers and exploring some of the variables that they may not be used to. And we find this particularly when you start doing productivity this way. You have to start from the beginning, making sure that people feel confident that what they're looking at is accurate. There'll be a lot of questions, so you make sure you have to be confident from the beginning that what you're looking at is accurate. So what we've done here is we've created a basic data table based upon our data that came out of the system. What I do want to show you is some of the ways that you can manipulate this data. Believe me, when you start standing up your dashboards, you will be working with this data table. And you're going to be working with this data table in a number of different ways. Not only are you going to be vetting your data, but sometimes it's just going to be easier if you're developing this to check out something by going right to the data source, or it's just going to be a tool that you're going to be toggling back and forth to during your development, and then subsequently moving forward, because it is the source of your information. And you really need to understand how you can move around in this data efficiently. I don't have a lot of columns here, but some of the data feeds that you might get could have a number of columns. This already has 9,500 rows, so as you begin thinking about your data, I'm going to walk you through some of the ways that you can interact with this information and your data efficiently. So let's go back to our drop-down here again. You'll notice a couple of different levels of functionality within this drop-down. The first is that you can do a sort. So I'm going to sort from A to Z. You'll notice that the drop-down here changed. If you can see that, even if I make it larger, you're not going to see it because that stays the same size. And it has you'll see it changed from the drop-down arrow. It has a drop-down arrow in that what looks like a little line there. That tells you that that field has been sorted. So you can do quick sorts on this data. The other thing that you can do is there are two ways of filtering your data at that drop-down. The first is to unclick Select All, and then select any one of the discrete elements in that column and say OK. Now, as I page down, you'll notice that my data has been filtered. I'm only looking at one of the staff transactions in this database. And so that's one way of sorting information. And now there are two ways to take that, well, there's actually more than two ways, but I'm going to show you two ways to take that filter off. Is I can go here and select all, and the filter is gone. Now, one of the things I forgot to show you is when I do a filter, you'll see that my little drop-down arrow is now gone, and I have a line which tells me that this column is sorted, and I have a little filter that looks like this filter up here on my menu bar to tell me that the column is also filtered. When I do my drop-down, I can see which that filter that is, and that's filtered on Romeo Brandt. Like I said, there's actually three quick ways to clear this filter. I can clear the filter by checking on Clear Filter from Staff. I can take the filter off by checking this Select All. The other way I can do it is I can click Clear up in my data menu items here and click, and you'll see that everything has been cleared. The sort has been cleared, the filter has been cleared. I am going to constantly remind you during this presentation to clear your filters. When you begin looking at this data, particularly if you have other people looking at the data, they're going to put filters on, they're going to put sorting on, and maybe they're not going to take them off. You're going to come in, you're not going to realize that the data is filtered. You're going to start looking at it, and it's a situation where there's going to be data missing, and you're not going to know that. So my rule of thumb, best practice is every time you finish an application that you applied a filter or a sort, clear it. It should become automatic for you. So the other piece in here is that we have ways of filtering our data on these drop down here, basically by checking off a name. The other piece is that you'll see that we can generate additional sort ability through this text filters. And the filters are different based upon your data type. So the data type here is a text field. This is not a numeric field. So you'll see your text sorts. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's something that you can go in and take a look at. But there are certainly text sorts that you can put. Equals, does not equal. Let's say that we want to sort on begins with the letter K. You're going to apply that. You'll see that I misspoke. That was a filter. You'll see my filter showed up in my drop-down box here, and if I page down here, you'll see that the only thing that I'm looking at is names that begin with K. I'm going to go back and clear that. In this application, it's simplest to filter here based upon use this ability to filter because there's so few distinct data elements in that column. So you probably won't end up using this text filter. But when we get over and take a quick look, let's jump over here to our client. Now our client is also a text field, but look at how many different values that you have in this column. So every time you may want to look at a different client, you'd have to use this bar and scroll down and find them, unselect all, select them. So a lot of times then if you knew a client number The simplest thing would be to use a text filter, go to your equals. You can even copy and paste a number in there, and then what you're going to do is be able to filter on that. So let's see if that works, see if I'm lying to you. Let's go into the text filter. Let's do equal. Let's see if I can paste. Let's paste that, say OK, and now you're filtered to that client. So if you only have a few, then use your selections, your box selections. If you've got a lot, then your text filters are going to be very helpful. Once again, clear your filters when you're done. So we took a look at the text choices, so let's now take a look at one of our fields, that is a date field. First of all, when you do the drop-down, Excel very nicely recognizes that these are date fields, and instead of listing every single date, they allow you to make your filter selections within a hierarchy. The highest level of this hierarchy, obviously, is year. So if I only wanted to look at the transactions in here from 2017, I check that, and suddenly I've only had my 2017 transactions. The hierarchy changes by pressing, there's a little plus sign here. So now, not only can I do year, but I can also do month. So say I don't care about 2017, but I do want to take a look at July in 2016. Now I'm looking at July in 2016. And in fact, if I wanted to look at specific days, there's another plus next to the month, and that's going to list all my days. This is a very nice feature, because once you get multiple years worth of data in your transaction set, there's no possible way you can use this to be able to filter. So this is a nice aggregation that Excel does for you automatically on date fields. The other thing is that when I open up my date filters, you'll see a whole slew of different kind of functionality within your filtering. You can do before a certain date, after, some between dates, which is something that you'll probably end up using with some regularity. You can look at quarters, months, years. So this really, as your transactional data set gets larger and larger, particularly if you've got a number of transactions that you're looking at in your data, this kind of data filtering is really going to come in handy. And Excel does a nice job for you of doing some aggregation over here. The time, it uses the number filters a little bit differently. It adds some interesting, it sees time as a number. So you have some interesting filters in here. Numbers between, numbers less than, greater than, less than or greater than, equals to. Some interesting things here. You could filter on the top 10. You could filter on what's above average, below average. So you really have some functionality at your filter level. So as you begin needing to go in and take a look at your data on a more detailed level, particularly as you're building out your dashboards and want to verify that your dashboards are an accurate representation of your underlying data and that you're not making any mistakes, these filtering kind of functionalities are really going to be extremely useful for you. I think that so we've really looked at the basic filter structure in text filters, number filters, and your ability to filter using your drop-downs. Another thing that I would want to talk about, we showed you how to sort here. Well, let me go back. You can do multiple filters. And so say I wanted to filter just for Romeo, who I'm going to pick on today, and I want Romeo's transactions only from 2017. you'll see now that I have 2 filter indicators and I have multiple filters applied. I could then go in and you'll see that the drop-down changes. So if Romeo provided services at more than one of my locations during 2017, when I did this drop-down, I'd see 2 programs here, but Romeo only provides services in Southtown. So the other programs I'm not going to see in my filter drop-down because they don't, the filter between the staff and the year means that only the Southside Clinic comes up here because that's the only place he provided services. You'll get used to that after a little while. I could then do another filter on this and filter just on Romeo's no-shows as an example. And then I've got a whole list of the no-shows that occurred at the Southside Center for Romeo for January. This is where this clear filter comes in really handy, because once you start putting on multiple filters into a data set, you'll see what happens. This original data set is 9,500 rows. When I applied 3 filters, this actually turns into a handful of rows, so it's absolutely critical in all these cases that you clear that filter and make sure that your starting point is the full data. One little thing about sorting. So it's very useful a lot of times to do multiple filter sorts, and you can do that easily. You can either do it through the drop-down or the filtering here, and you'll be able to really hone in much more effectively on the data that you want to look at. But when you do sorts, watch what happens. I'm going to sort this A to Z, but then I'm going to try to sort this oldest to newest. And what happens here is it's not going to maintain the double sort. It's actually going to use this sort as the primary sort, and it's going to take off this filter here. Now, if you've worked with data before, a lot of times when you're eyeballing your data, you really do want multiple sorts in your data. So let me clear this and show you how to do that. I'm in my data menu, and I've got this control here that's called sort. I'm going to press on that sort, a dialog box is going to come up, and this is where you can add multiple levels. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sort on staff, and it's going to be from A to Z. I'm going to add a level, and the second level I'm going to sort on date. And then a third level, I'm going to add another level, I'm going to sort on service code. And I'm going to say OK. So now you'll see I have 3 sort indicators across my first row. I've sorted staff, I've sorted date, and I've sorted service code. So this is the only way that you can do multiple sorts. You end up sorting 3 and 4 and 5 different elements, normally not, particularly not with a database this size or a table this size, but you'll certainly be doing multiple sorts, and at least 2 levels of sorts from time to time, and using this sort button is the only way that you can do that. So once again, we're going to clear this, best practice, and once you're done doing something, clear it out. This is going to leave me back down here at 256. One of the interesting things about Excel is that it left me at the 2,560 row, but it maintained a static first row that will allow me to be anywhere in my table and be able to select my filters and my sorts. It's really akin to the freeze functionality that you may use from time to time, but it does it automatically and keeps that first row current for you at all times. One of the ways I move around this quickly is, so it left me at row 2500. I could page up, oops, I don't want to do that. I could page up, and that'll take me a second or so. The other thing that I can do is I can press my end button on my keyboard and my up arrow at the same time, and I'm going to go to the top. If I want to go to the bottom, I can press my end key and my down arrow, and it's going to take me to the bottom. Moving around your database quickly from top to bottom is something that just use those two keystrokes, and you're going to move around really pretty quickly. So that's sorting, that's creating. We've taken our report from our EHR. We've created a table or a database. We started vetting it a little bit, taking a look at our unique values, making sure that they're what we think they should be. You will note that the data in the sample database has January of 2017 and June through December of 2016. It's just for your point of view, so if you're looking around with the sample database and you're looking for a 12-month, you're not going to find it. Took some time to put this base together, and I ran out of patience. So we have this all here. So now what we want to do is talk a little bit about aggregation, or how we may want to use the table to explore our data a little bit further, and that may be adding up our units as an example. So what we're going to want to do is, when you're inside of your table, you're going to see these highlighted, well, you're not going to see the Analyze. The Analyze is an Excel add-in for some higher level data analysis. And if you're interested, you can go out and Google that and take a look. You'll see this design feature. One of the first things I do, and once I've created this table, best practice is to name your table. You'll see that once we get into your building your dashboards, that this is going to be a pretty key element. So name your table. All you do is go into table name, click your cursor in there, and I'm going to call this sample data. Something simple. One thing about naming a table, you can't have any, you can have underscores, but you can't have any blanks in there. So I'm going to name that table. I have a table name here. There's a couple other functionalities in here. You could resize it, but we don't need it resized. It's a perfect representation of our data. Don't get too excited about summarizing with pivot tables yet. We'll talk about that. You can remove duplicates. Sometimes you might get duplicates in your data. This is an easy way to eliminate duplicates, and when you press that, you can tell it what fields that may be duplicated that you want to eliminate. So one of the things is that a key piece here, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to unselect all, and I'm going to say, okay, eliminate duplicates on client name, or not client name, client number. And so it's suddenly going to say, whoa, they found 8,100 duplicates. That's got to be a mistake. I know I need 9,000. If I eliminate all the duplicates on client numbers, I don't have the data that I need. So even if you weren't paying attention and you pressed OK, this button up here at the top, the undo remove duplicate, will be your best friend. I use it all the time. I make mistakes, I move too quickly, and that's going to take me back to where I was. I'm going to check it. I'm going to do and arrow down. All right, phew, I'm back to where I need to be. We have a couple other things. A slicer, we'll be taking a look at that real quick, and this will be an important aspect of our dashboard creation. pieces up here. You can go into here and say, you can make it look as different as you want it to. The default is blue. I don't tend to change my style of my tables very often. I like the Bandit. It's easy to read. So you could take your header row off. I don't know why you would do that. You can change your banding. I don't end up using those very often. You can take your filter button off. I'm not sure why you do that either, because working with this data really involves the filtering that we need to do. But this button right here, total row, is really going to be something that you're going to want to be able to utilize. So I'm going to press that total row, and then in each of these data columns, if I click in it, I'm going to get a drop down. So what I'm going to do is then have different functions that I can apply to this column to help me understand the data. So in this text field, you can't, average count, count numbers, max, min, sum, really doesn't help you much. These kind of drop-downs help you once you get into either numeric fields or date fields. So let's see what happens here. So I can go in and minimum date, so it tells me that the first date I have in my database is June 1st, 2016. That's a pretty helpful function. Going, all right, what's the last? Let me pick that, max. Okay, the last date I have is January 30th. Yeah, then go through, and this is something that I use to vet my data also, because let's take a look at this. So I'm in a start time field, and I'm going to press max, and it tells me that I have a start time in my transaction field at 11:30 p.m. I then am going to go, I'm not sure that I should have a transaction for 11:30 p.m. So now I'm in a position that I have to go into my data and take a look at it. Is there a problem with my data? I don't have 11:30 visits, so I'm going to go to my drop-down. I'm going to unselect all. I'm going to pull this all the way down and I'm going to say, wow, I have an 11:30, I have a 10:30, my clinics close at 7. What is going on here? I'm going to select a couple of these and take a closer look at them. And when I see them, I go, oh, well, all right, this helps in that these lates are only no-shows. That's fine, but I'm still not comfortable with having data in my field, in my data table that doesn't make sense. This just does not make sense to me. Now, it doesn't hurt the data that I'm looking at right now as long as I don't need to evaluate no-shows based upon time of day. Now, you think about that. That's sometimes when you might be thinking about how you're going to schedule your staff or how you're going to deal with no-shows. Time of day might be a useful bit of information to know about that. I can't use that in this database. You need to understand that. The other thing you need to do then is what I would do in this circumstance, I'm going to go back to the medical record. I'm going to find why the heck am I getting no-shows at 11:30 at night. So this is one example of being able to use these kind of fields at the bottom to begin thinking about how you vet your data. Again, I'm going to go back into data and I'm going to clear everything. I'm going to do my down arrow and I'm going to go down to the bottom and I'm going to take these out. So you'll see that, I could go in here and actually then some units, and they're very useful. I mean, you really need to understand how you can utilize this as not only as a tool for vetting your data, but doing some very simple data analysis. So let me do, we've got a few minutes left here before we go to questions. So I promised just sort of a pivot table preview. I know that this doesn't have a heck of a lot to do with dashboards, but it really is going to be the foundation you're going to be working from. So let's do a scenario. So, you know, you're working, you have some responsibility around data, and your CEO knows that you took this, you looked at this webinar, and he or she comes into your office and says, you know, now that we've got access to some of this data, I'm a little bit concerned about Wayne. I think that maybe his units of service are dropping over the month. Can you do a quick analysis for me and show me what's happening? So you go, all right, let's see, I've got this here. Well, there's a couple of different ways. How am I going to do this? So I can give you the blunt instrument approach, and then I'll show you the pivot table approach. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new workbook in here. I'm going to go back in here, so I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take Wayne, and I'm going to put him over here, and I'm going to copy him here. And then I want to look at June, July, and August. And then I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say, all right, let's filter on Wayne. Let's filter on June, and let's see what his unit count is. Okay, so I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste that over into here, and now I've got his June. Let's go back into here. Let's change my filter. Let's go, instead of June, I'm going to do July. Let's do it here, and on and on and on, and you could do that for all your data, and that will take you a little time and effort, but all you'll know is units. You won't know anything about the services he provided. You won't know, you know, what his no-shows were. So instead of doing it that way, let's do it this way. Let's go in here, and let's go up into here, and let's take your newest best friend, which is a pivot table. We're going to get a little dive on. Now, I'm going to go through this step by step next time, so I'm just going to go through this quickly to give you an idea of what your possibilities are. I'm going to tell it where I want to have my, my pivot table. It's going to show my pivot functionality here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring dates into here. I'm going to have to group these so I can work with these a little better. Don't worry, again, we'll show you how to do this. Suddenly I'm grouped on months. I'm going to take a staff. I'm going to bring them into accounts here. I'm going to take the units. I'm going to bring it down here. And I'm going to take a new filtering tool, and I'm going to insert a slicer. I'm going to do it on staff. I'm going to do that here. I'm going to filter on this staff. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to insert a pivot chart. And I think I'm probably going to want a line graph because we're doing some longitudinal work. Let's bring that down into here. Let's move it here. And I'm going to go here. I don't want those field buttons to be there. I'm going to hide those. I want a trend analysis, so let's put that in there. I never like these here. I'm going to format those and move those to the bottom. Let's do that. Okay, let's close that down here. And so let's take a look at this, and suddenly, instead of going through all that work to add up one by one, I made a quick pivot table with a pivot chart with filtering that then I can go and say, okay, let's take a look at everybody. And so you can go back to your CFO and say, yeah, or CEO and say, yeah, we are a little bit concerned about Wayne. We're seeing a general drop in his units of service over time, but guess what? We're seeing the same thing with Valerie, and we're seeing the same Well, this looks pretty good here. Actually, this is a pretty decent trend line, but let's look at here. From August on, it's actually downward trending. So maybe what we should do is, well, we're going to run out of time, but I could go insert another filtering agent in here and be able to filter on date. So again, this was just to tease you to show up next time in that we can take this data, we can understand how it's structured, we can use the table filtering tools to vet the data, to look at your data at an individual level. You could use it to create some of your aggregations, but you'll see that this is now starting to look a little bit like your dashboard. And so what will be, I hope I've enticed you enough to show up for our next presentation when we will start doing this pivot tabling from a step-by-step basis. So you'll be able to move from your database or your data table to these data visualizations with these filtering tools and begin structuring out your dashboards. So with that, I didn't do too bad. I went over a little bit. Let's go back and really see if we have a few minutes to answer some of the questions that came through. So, Serena, would you like to let me know what people are asking about? Anybody out there? Serena, Jocelyn?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, sorry about that. So the first one is someone just wanted to confirm that you will be going over pivot tables more in depth in the next webinar.
Absolutely. The next webinar is exclusively pivot tables, slicers, and pivot charts and graphs. We'll spend a good amount of time just doing a step-by-step on how to create those.
Great. The next one is, how can you count distinct data elements in one table?
Distinct data elements in one table. Well, there is I promised that I would not force people to know how to write formulas. But you can write a formula. Excel has a formula that is called distinct count. And I can't pop back and forth to my Excel spreadsheet, but there is a distinct count functionality that you can use to determine your distinct count within any table column.
Okay. And can you edit your table to show only select columns?
Sure. There's a couple different ways you can do that. One of the ways is that if you click on the top of the column and right-hand click, you'll see a functionality and a little dialog box shows up and it will say hide. And you could hide that column and then it's outside of your table. If you have a column that you don't need, you can, instead of hiding that column, you can delete that column. I would recommend that you not delete columns, because if your report comes through with a full column set, your dashboard is going to expect that column to be in your data even though you're not using it. So if you have columns in your table that you don't really want to see, then hide them. Don't delete them.
Great. And we actually had two people ask this question. How do you remove the table format from the data?
Table format. I should have showed that. I apologize. So if you're in your table and you will have a menu item. Actually, let's do this. Let me share mine. That's no problem. Let's do this. Let's go back to, you should be back to seeing my Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yep.
Okay, so what we want, so you're in your table here, so let's clear all my filters. Actually, while I was talking, I hit a column. So if I cross across the column, say I put my cursor in the B and crossed it over to D, and a right-hand click, I'm going to unhide. When you're up in your design, there's an element right here called Convert to Range. And if you do that, then this is no longer a table. It's just a range of cells. And if you want to turn it back into the table and go to Insert and do Table, make sure you have your headers clicked, and you have your table back again. So you can convert it to a range if you need to.
Great. Next question, is there a benefit to taking the CSV file and saving it as an Excel file?
Well, yeah, what you'll probably want, well, that's a difficult. My recommendation is then once you open this as a CSV, you go on to File, do Save As. Let's save it in here. It'll try to save it as a comma delimited, which is a CSV. It'll ask you, well, it already exists. So I would recommend, and that's a very good question and a good point, I would recommend that you then do save it as an Excel workbook.
Okay. And will the order you choose of filters make a difference? For example, if you want to see all the staff of a client works with, I assume you filter by client first, then by staff, et cetera.
Well, I would do, if I do one staff, I would start with a staff, and then all I'm going to see in my drop-down over here is the clients that that individual staff saw. So as we did here, the choices that you get are informed by the first filter you do. So the better example here is that when I choose Romeo, the only thing that I'm going to see here are the two programs he provided services in, and when I do the drop down here, it'll only show me the clients that he provided services to. So yes, your filters inform the choices in your second filter, and if I was wanted to know what clients Romeo served, I would filter on Romeo first, and then have a smaller set of clients to choose from.
I think we have time for one more. How can I see the number of rows after filtering or sorting?
The number of rows after filtering or sorting. So let's go to, I have a sorting will not change the number of rows. It'll only change the order of them. Filtering, in fact, will change the number of rows. I'm going to do my and down arrow. I'm going to come here, and I'm going to, I'll make sure my table rows are on, and I doubled those up. Of course, you know, technology doesn't work when you need it to work. If I do a count, you'll see my original database was 9,000 rows. Once I apply a filter and I do a count against any field, it'll tell you how many rows you have left. And in this case, Romeo provided 1,217 services. So that would be the answer to that. And I see that we're running 1 over. So again, I'd like to invite everybody to stick it out and to come back next time, and where we will be taking a much more comprehensive look at pivot tables and data visualizations. Again, today was an opportunity to build the foundation. Our next presentation will be building our visualizations in our dashboards. And with that, I'm going to thank everybody for attending. I know this was useful for some. Some of you advanced folks, it may have been a little bit boring, but again, stick it out. I'm sure that by the end of the series, you'll find some very interesting and useful abilities within Excel for analyzing, monitoring, and creating data visualizations. With that, everybody have a great day, and we'll hopefully talk again on Thursday the 18th at noon. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care. Bye.